He's got the coolest job in the world. How does somebody who operates on the human brain by day operate a self-storage portfolio by night? Today on Stories Behind the Door podcast, co-founder of Self Storage Brothers, Dr. Richard Dalyai. Really excited today to welcome a guest who's spent over almost a decade, working on the most complex organ in the human body. He's a neurosurgeon by day, now building a self-storage portfolio, which I find absolutely fascinating. Excited to welcome Dr. Richard Dalyai to the show today. We have so much in common, least of which probably is our interest in the storage industry, although we're going to spend a lot of time talking about that. Before I get to questions for him, I want to give a quick shout out to our sponsors at Kiwi 2, steel providers for 30 plus years, Wayne Woolsey and his team. You can reach out to them at kiwisteel.com, the new website. Take advantage early if you have a ground up project you're working on. Get their insight. They can save you a lot of time and money with their 30 plus years of experience. Well, as I said, our guest today, Richard Dalyai, pronounced like the flower. Really excited to welcome a neurosurgeon to the show, which is absolutely a first for the Stories Behind the Door podcast. This podcast always starts out with the same question, though, and maybe even more exciting question for you because of what your day job is. What got you into self-storage?
Well, yeah, thanks for having me, Thaddeus. It's always great to talk with you. It's listening, being a fan of your podcast and reaching out. I think it's similar to some people. It wasn't certainly something I had thought about when I was in college or med school or even earlier, something to, I think I probably like other people had got into the industry right before COVID, right around 2020. And I think part of my journey was with real estate and as a physician is many of us now in neurosurgery work for larger bureaucracies and larger units where we are employees. And for me personally, I had thought about the route with physician leadership and had just recently got my MBA. And it was kind of like, where are my interests? Where am I going through? And through avenues with real estate kind of was attracted to the niche of self-storage, which drew to me personally and to our family is something with real estate, providing value with building and lands, and yet something where it's a little bit different than multifamily with some business operations. So we own and operate our facilities ourselves.
I have like 10 questions that I have just from your first answer. I told you this off camera. I always get all these questions in my head. I'm going to start writing them down so I don't forget them. The big one for me is you get your degree from Tufts, right? You graduate from Tufts undergrad. You go to Tufts medical school. You leave Tufts. You go to Philadelphia. You're from New Jersey. You get Thomas Jefferson, really prestigious residency there. Then you go get an MBA. Where's this drive? I mean, that's a lot of work. Where's the drive to want to go pursue that? Why that route?
Yeah, no one in my family nobody was a physician. My dad was a social worker. My mom worked for Verizon Bell, New Jersey Bell at the time. But I think that just having a passion for learning, being on the path. But I think for a lot of physicians, you're taught from a young age that with this path, high school to college to medical school to residency, and it's on this path. If you want to become a doctor, that's what you're going to do. And there's really always another stepping stone to get to be a physician. And then you go residency, which is training. You finish that, and you're like, well, now what? There's nothing else. So I think that, after we do residency and training at 7 years. I started at 25, finished 32. So that's a large part where you're working 100-hour weeks. And so much of your time is invested in learning. For me, it was learning neurosurgery, learning these techniques and how to take care of for patients. And then all of a sudden, when you become fully board certified and credentialed, it's okay, well, what am I also passionate about? So I think that that's a path for different physicians for all physicians to find out where they're passionate and where they can, for me with business and entrepreneurship and with my family, that real estate is something kind of fell into. And then we became interested in it. And it's something that kind of became a passion project, if will.
So, next question I want to ask you, you decide to go into storage. One of the reasons a lot of people like to get into storage investing in acquiring assets is because there's this wealth of third-party management companies that they could
Yeah.
go hand off their site to and get professional level management. Granted, they're going to pay a percentage of their gross to
Yeah.
that management company, and they lose a little bit of the control. You go the opposite direction. What
Yeah.
made you want to manage these assets yourself?
I'll say for us involved in a lot of this, I give credit with my wife and my mother. So it's really a family business with the three of us being involved, especially operationally, because I'm full time practicing vascular neurosurgeon. So what I think from a management standpoint, that is having a local. We are Eastern North Carolina. We're not Dallas. We're not a major metro. I guess we're in the Sun Belt, but having a local presence was part of our advantage that we worked into. And some of that's where we were located and lived in Greenville, North Carolina. So we had that local knowledge of the area, right? I felt that, and some of this is kind of taking that neurosurgery side of learning everything I could possibly about a facility and a piece of real estate that's in my backyard more than anybody else, including the guy that owned it for 20 years. So that became an advantage. Same thing operationally with knowing the people, knowing the population. AI is a whole nother topic that we've heavily gotten into, but having people with accents for Greenville, North Carolina became an advantage with knowing our clientele and stuff. So there's certainly challenges with it, but we feel we're able to use it to an advantage, and it's worked for us.
I love hearing that concept, and a few of my really close friends in the industry really are lean into that idea of being local with their storage facilities and how they can compete, even with REITs in certain cases. Not REITs aren't in every market, but larger players, by just leaning into that localness of it. I'm intrigued by with your background, obviously going through medical school and
Mhm.
residency in neuroscience and understanding the human brain, but then flipping to business school. And what was it when you got into storage and you started really diving into the industry that made you feel like that was the path, that was the asset class that made sense to go and build something in?
Yeah, so we actually had kind of co-working office space. We had retail. With those kind of the operational levers that we could pull were just less compared to self-storage. It's also right time, right place. The facilities did well. So you're able to see that. It's rewarding to drive revenue and to drive occupancy. Like video games like SimCity and stuff as a kid. I think certain things that you can see. And when you have a sense of ownership, the other part, which not to, is that like it's as a family project to work on something with your wife and your mother and to see it grow, that is rewarding. As a physician, I literally legally cannot own the hospital that I work in. It is extremely hard with the payment system and stuff like that to even open up my own clinic. Everything is tied to hospitals. So it led to that sense of ownership. And then again, with self-storage itself, there was an opportunity. A lot of things happened fortuitously or for whatever reason, but self-storage, having those, understanding what was there, we had cold call facilities and owners in our own market in Greenville. And first it was just to be, educated on what this is, being brand new and going into it. But that led to opportunity. And then I think that, again, as a vascular neurosurgeon, that's very subspecialized. It's also maybe our goal of being a niche, knowing that very, very well. I think that there was advantages, at least for us, for that.
Inch wide, mile deep, right? Know where you're going and get really, really good at it. I love that philosophy. I want to talk about the journey for you, right? You get into storage in
Mm.
2020. Obviously, we have this massive COVID boom. The
Yeah.
last 3 years have not been as pleasant for a lot of folks in the industry as 2020 to 2022 was. What's that journey been like for you? And talk to me a little bit about how the shifts in the market have affected you locally with the product you own.
So we have 10 facilities now. And like you said, it's from 2020 when we first entered and sold a couple facilities. We're fortunate where we have a long hold period. Again, being kind of with the family business, it's done well. We're lucky with the area that we just happen to be in Eastern North Carolina, that even with, and I know you talk a lot about the supply, and some of that we have developed and we have converted warehouses and done that. So we are responsible for some of it, but we've been fortunate enough with our growing population, with the area, with the use for storage, that we've been pretty well protected with our occupancy and revenue and stuff. So,
Love to hear that.
it was, yeah, I mean, it was super easy to people, following on X. Our goal is to buy and sell in all markets where things make sense. But, the market's the presence, the interest rates, what they are that enable and for buyers and sellers to kind of meet. But we've been able to grow, and every year we've bought facilities and expanded.
Let's go back to that same time frame, because I got into the industry in 2021. That's when I first started immersing. And
Mhm.
I started the podcast in late 2022. And really that kind of has immersed me more in talking to many other people in the industry. It feels like to me, technology has changed so much on a store level, even from 22, 23 to 2026. You guys are operating your own stores. How have you leaned into what's going on with technology, and where is it maybe helping really well, and maybe where is it a little bit overhyped in your estimation?
Yeah, I think that from some of the facilities that we took over, the baseline was so low of what was required to wrap it in some technology, whether that's a gate key or a website or whatever, and obviously answering the phone. Again, I think that in 2020, 2021, there was a lot of information out there with followers on X and Nick Huber, who did a good job with kind of having a basic playbook. We've really leaned in on ourselves. That talks about anything, whether it's medicine or self storage, is going to wants to. But we've really kind of, and again, one is to take things from medicine and to use your limitations as an advantage, in the sense that I can't be involved on answering the phone and to do different things. Obviously, people have, support for that and other employees, but the systems in place to review things frequently. And that's where, I think personally for us, with having projects like Claude, to, our biggest thing is we switched property management, which we can get into, to really have our own database center in a Google Cloud, a BigQuery. So we really harness any kind of questions that we have to pull through that data and to ask questions that may change, make operational decisions. We've certainly changed our operations in the last 5 years. We think that we were, evolutionary in 2020 when we took over these facilities from where they were. But I think it's exciting everywhere.
I'm fascinated by this conversation. Obviously, Public Storage announced in March they're going to buy NSA, right? The first
Mhm.
largest company buys the third largest company. And, you look at the top 12, it's all private equity, Wall Street money, or it's big REITs. You guys are leaning into AI, and you talked about using cloud and property management. Is that like an absolute necessity now? If you're going to run 10 stores and scale, do you have to be leaning into that side of it to even pretend to compete on a level with some of the bigger players that are now starting to, consolidate the space?
We certainly see the advantages of it, which is why I'll say there are challenges with AI. I mean, at least for me personally, and I think with everything being new, you can get into a project with developing something, whether it's a dashboard, and spend a lot of time, and you're like, okay, this isn't just that useful. It's just not going to be part of our workflow. But I mean, I think that's part of what's exciting, is finding what, these new avenues to explore and to optimize the business. Daily briefs that we do every morning. We review every single transcript, every phone call, which we do on our own, and have a database for every single thing that's entered. And then we review them on a daily basis, which again, we would never be able to do that with our 5 employees. We're able to do that now. I think that it was advice, and you get mixed advice and stuff like that too, obviously, when you start something, but the basics work. A Google business profile, like, that's been consistent. I think that there's things that are higher yield. I think once you do things, and it's a time to, especially now where we've acquired a facility last year, so it's not too long ago, but really to hone in our operations and the focus on that if we're not onboarding another facility. So is it a necessity? I think that you're in danger of getting things, you're getting left behind. But again, we have different vendors that work for us, and to understand what they're doing, because again, we have it's at the end of the day, when you own something, you have a different mindset to make sure. And again, I think that's part of wanting to understand all avenues and really dig into where we can make an impact.
Fascinated by this question too for operators, because with this influx of technology has come so many. I mean, I went to my first SSA show in March of 22 in Orlando, and there were very few tech vendors on the trade show floor. You go
Yeah.
to a SSA show now, and more than 50% of the booths are tech vendors.
Yeah.
How do you, as an operator, and to your point about AI, how do you make sure you're not going down every rabbit hole and trying to check out every single product that comes onto the floor, and be able to keep the direction of your company, but yet still be able to adapt to the changes that are coming that actually can be helpful?
Yeah, I would listen to your podcast. I think is one to it's
You're too
trying
kind,
to
my friend. I
uh
appreciate that.
but no, but it's seriously to hear what people have to say, the roundtables. I mean, those are to being educated about what's out there. I mean, you can't always to leap into stuff, but I think where it makes sense, now with software, what you can do on your own versus having a vendor and being careful with things because at the end of the day, things are on the expense, right? So they need to
Yeah.
justify the return on investment that you're adding into it versus whether it's a call center or voice AI versus on what you're doing. And we've had to make some that we found very compelling that just we don't think justified the change in cost for us. And I think time will tell with a lot of stuff. So you just hope to certainly a property management that, and again, we've been through switching those. That's a painful switch, but that's so important that we're using on a daily basis. So those things you have to really make the right decision. You can't keep switching on that.
Let's go down. I'm going to take a little bit of a left turn and go down a
Yeah.
lane. You kind of open up the door, which is the value of this as a family business.
Yeah.
Obviously, you're a neurosurgeon, you're busy, you work your butt off to do that side of it, but you get to run this business with your wife. I know you have young kids as well. Talk to
Yeah.
me about the value of this business just in terms of what it does for your family and what that means to you.
Yeah. Again, I think it's something that and again, it might be different than some, but my wife and I, we enjoy engaging on discussing. My mom's involved. So it's something that is a dynamic that for it to work, that everybody has to be part of it. I do think that having a sense of ownership stuff in our company ours is called Self Storage Brothers, which I'm an only child. It's actually when we're brainstorming names, my two boys who are now going to be 10 and 12 next month. But you think of something, and obviously we could sell everything and who knows what we'll think. The advice I had is like with certain buys, you buy well, it's your attention to it and your consistency. But yeah, I mean, there's something to be said of teaching my boys as a family business what this is, being stewards to property and to a business, and to have that outlook on things. They're a part of it. They're out there checking units, taking pictures on social media. So to have them feel that it's a part of our family, I think is something to grow and provide value, and in a way to serve others. So I think that's been it's a lot harder to take them into an operating room than to take them and check on units and stuff like that.
I Yesterday I did a roundtable for my other podcast, Stories Unlocked, and John C. Lindsay was on the show, who's North
Mhm.
Carolina border bred. His dad was a
Yeah.
developer. He grew up, and another good friend of the show, Alex Burnham, who grew up in the Storage Mart family and would, at 15 years old, his first job was sweeping out units, and have tremendous respect for those two people. So I'm excited to fast forward 15, 20 years and see where your sons are at having
Yeah.
that experience, and what a cool thing to be able to provide with them. Because as you said, when you're a doctor in a hospital, you don't just get to get your 12-year-old to scrub in and come watch what you're doing. That's a little bit harder to take your child to work deal, but
Yeah.
very, very cool to hear that family story. Talk to me about the plan. Like for Storage Brothers, where do you want to go? And you've amassed 10 facilities in a
Yeah.
in a local area in a matter of 6 years, which is unbelievable. Where are you trying to go with this, and what do you see it long term?
Yeah, I think that is hitting 10 facilities is interesting because for us with expanding, we have our in-house call center. Again, we run all of the operations. You start to have to think about making some decisions of how you change your operations. Certainly, we don't do the same when we just had two facilities to start, but getting to those next facilities and what 20 looks like is another layer. We haven't really taken outside money. There's obviously as a physician, there's networks and stuff, but that's something that we haven't done. So while successful, and again, to go out and to do that is also another level that we've considered. So we're kind of open on where the path right now. We like to think we're opportunistic. So where there's something that makes sense in our wheelhouse in our area to buy geographically. We've always been around 2 hours from Greenville, so Raleigh East. So those are the things that we think about as kind of for the next steps. But, again, I think along that line, just to be thoughtful and planning strategically, we see what opportunities arise, whether that's other partners we're growing and how we adapt that.
I love hearing this story. I've been asking the question a lot. I had a LinkedIn poll a couple last week maybe about, is there still a lane for somebody to grow a portfolio in the self storage industry? Obviously, I brought up PSA acquiring NSA. Extra
Yeah.
bought Life a few years ago. It just feels like the speed of consolidation is so fast, and the cap rate that those things are trading at. If you're not and you
Yeah.
said this, right? You're long-term hold, right? You're private money and you're not facing a 5-year balloon payment that gets to be crazy when you got to pay back
Right.
investors. It's nice and fun for me to hear somebody who's actually going out and building that. So just know from my side of it, what an awesome chance to get to connect. And I know we connected not on the podcast a couple months
Yeah.
ago, and I got a chance to hear a little bit of the story. But what a really cool thing to be confronting. The reality is, and we talked about this a little more in depth, as you just said, you're really at a pivotal point, right? Because if you go from 10 to 50, that's a very different
Yeah.
business than going from 0 to 10. So where I'm going with this, and the question I want to ask is, what are the more challenging decisions that you have in your life? Do they happen on the operating table, or is that sort of just like, hey, I know what I'm doing here. I was trained to do this, and it's go do A, B, C, D, versus the business where you have some foundational, questions that you got to answer about where you want to go.
Yeah, it's both fields have their own stresses, certainly, and they have their own rewards and stuff like that. And I love it. People, I have no plans. I love neurosurgery and vascular neurosurgery and helping patients that have strokes and brain bleeds. But there are very unique stresses with that. I would say I think with storage and planning things, and like you say, in projecting, I don't think people had anticipated interest rates being this high for that long, with higher for longer. I think that there's, again, but for us, we've been fortunate in cash flowing assets that have done well. You bring up REITs and kind of the competition, and at 10, we've been quite fortunate. It's a little bit, we see the different cost to acquire customers in our Raleigh markets compared to there's being left alone from the REITs in some tertiary markets makes it the yield's better. There's certainly the yield's better, and the risk is even lower, which almost, so the risk adjusted return is significantly higher. Those markets have performed well. Now, how that changed with more automation, and will public storage ever going to literally a town that they call Little Washington before it, even though it's Washington, North Carolina. I don't know. But that's also, I guess, part of the hypothesis of where the whole industry as it moves 5, 10 years down the road. But I think that we see where their management style and their operations, but I think that we still think that there's advantages from our call center and to being local of what we can do and identify properties on that. And again, as long as it's cash flowing and the investment is taking care of itself, then over the long term, we could rise out the highs and lows on that.
I try very hard to keep this conversation to 30 minutes, but I
Oh,
might go a
interesting.
couple seconds over
Oh,
because
you're
I
fine
would
then.
be remiss if
Yeah.
we didn't talk a little bit about Tufts University, our shared
Yeah.
alma mater. Talk to me about how you got from coastal New Jersey to Boston to go to Tufts, Medford, Somerville, really across the river. But if it was Philadelphia, that would actually be Boston because the city would have just annexed it, like Philly annexed everything
Yeah.
around it.
Yeah.
How did that journey happen, and what was the experience like for you going to Tufts for both undergrad and for medical school?
I love Tufts. Tufts was fantastic. Always, my dad went to school at Berkeley School of Music in Boston. So I always had an interest growing up in New Jersey of the Red Sox and Patriots. And, my sports was going to Yankee Stadium and rooting against them. Thankfully I did it when I was 8 and 9 years old. So
Yeah,
no, I wasn't starting any fights at the time or
yeah,
anything like
that's
that, and they
great.
thought it was cute. And from there, the fantastic place to train for neurosurgery was Jefferson in Philadelphia. That was a phenomenal experience. We loved, my wife and I, and we loved Philadelphia. And then really we moved to North Carolina for to be a vascular neurosurgeon to kind of lead the division of that. And, it's, we've just been, embraced the community, wonderful community in Greenville, North Carolina. So that's kind of geographically how it took us down. But yeah, that foundational skills of how to critically think about problem solutions, that, Tufts was the foundation of that for me.
Couldn't agree with you more about of course, I grew up in Massachusetts, so I was a Red
Yeah.
Sox fan and a Patriots
From
fan
the,
from birth as well. But
yeah.
I'm a little jealous of you because you went to Tufts. You were there from like '01 to '08, I think,
Oh, it
between
was a
undergrad
perfect
and
time.
medical school. Yeah, it was terrible time for Boston area sports, right?
Well, experience 2003 to going to
Uh,
all those and, running into Tom Brady and Smith and Walensky. Those were great experiences on the.
How cool is that?
again, celebrating some amazing victories.
I love it. I cannot thank you enough for taking out time from your incredibly busy schedule. Like you don't have
Yeah.
enough on your plate already to come and share the story. I feel blessed to have listened and gotten to get a little background on what makes you tick and where you've gone in the storage industry. Really appreciate you coming and joining the show.
Thanks for having me, Thaz. It was great talking to you. Love what
Absolutely a
you're doing.
pleasure. We'll have to
Big
do this
fan.
again, and I'll get you on a round table sometime. We'll
Uh,
figure out a way to make that work. Before we leave, I want to give one more shout out to our friends at Kiwi 2. Without them, this podcast doesn't happen. So if you're a fan of the podcast and you have any type of ground up construction conversion, you need steel for a project, please reach out to them and put them in the mix for your business. That is one of the best ways you can say thank you for the content that I put out there. Wayne Woolsey and his team, as I say all the time, simply the best crews in steel, 30 plus years. They know what they're doing. And if you have a project, especially if it's a little bit of a challenge, they can really help you understand how to make it work. KiwiSteel.com. That's it for this week's edition of Stories Behind the Door podcast. He's Richard Dalyai. I'm Thaddeus Campbell. We'll see everybody next week.